by the way, while she's writing, who was the leader of the Spanish that came in and overthrew the Aztecs? What was his name?
Do they call conquistadors?
I can't hear you.
Those Spanish explorers,
Were they what?
conquistadors?
Yes, and we're going to study about that the next chapter, next unit.
Okay, so I had the Inca civilization, and their location is in the Andes Mountains, and their capital, which is Cusco, is situated near modern Peru. So their empire stretched from all the way from the main top of South America, almost stretched all the way to the bottom. And the time period was 1200 to 1533 AD. And for their economy, they mostly relied on agriculture, growing corn and potatoes. And to farm on the steep land, they built terraces in the mountainside and made canals to irrigate the crops. For their religion, they're polytheistic, which means that they are more than one god. And they actually had more than 15 gods, which all served different purposes, but their most important god was Inti, which was the sun god. The end of the civilization. So the Spanish began the conquering of the Inca Empire in 1532, and by 1572, the last Incan state was fully conquered by this guy right here. This is Francisco Pizarro, and like most Spanish conquistadors, they brought over disease. This guy just basically wiped out an entire civilization because they were used to their germs and the Incans were not. As for their contributions, they contributed calendars, like most of the other civilizations we've been over, textiles and mummification, and they actually practiced divination as well. That was something that they contributed, and that's like telling the future, like fortune telling, and they did that in many different ways, like with nature and stuff. As for their technology, they constructed roads that spanned 2,250 miles and bridges with suspension cables, and they used these roads for their trade routes. As for their government, their emperor ruled with an aristocratic bureaucracy, and he gave out harsh punishments. And an aristocratic bureaucracy is like a monarchy. It functions similar to a monarchy. And their emperor was called the Sapa Inca. For their social circle, it started with the emperor, and then from the emperor it went down to the nobles, and then the warriors, and then the common people. And the common people, it was called an Ailu, I think that's how you say that. And basically families in the Inca Empire were born into these groups with different families. They all worked together, they lived in the same like community, and they all worked together, and once you were born into that, you couldn't get out of it. Kind of like the caste system that we talked about last semester. And that's it.
Okay, so if you had to summarize what we remember the Inca for, I was looking for a question I thought I put on here and I should have, so we'll need to add it, but if you had to summarize the Incas, what would you say?
I would say that the Incas were very intelligent people. They were very advanced in their technology and the way that they did things, especially with building the roads. It kind of reminds you of the Greeks, how they built their roads to connect their empire. They were conquered by the Spanish people, like most people of their time, but they contributed a lot to agriculture. And I forgot to mention this, but they actually had a lost city called Machu Picchu that wasn't discovered until the 1900s. And it was not discovered by the Spaniards whenever they came over to conquer everything. So they were just very strong people, but the sickness, they could not get over that.
So actually, they were, Machu Picchu was so high up in the Andes that it was discovered and then it was lost again. And then it was rediscovered by a man named, I think, Hiram Bingham. And so it's interesting. But they did have a large network of roads. They had a system of laws. And they had such a good governmental system that they had the ruler at the top. And what's the most famous ruler they had in the Incas? Do you know? Pachacuti.
Yes.
Pachacuti. So he was the most well-known emperor or king or person at the top. And then below that, they had groups of 10, and it would go down farther, and there would be 10 under each person into the smaller groups that they lived in, the communities, and they were well run and they got along well. So good system of government in that it worked that way. It was such a large civilization that how did they get word from one place to another? They didn't have email and text and phones. So they had that big road system. So the way their government worked would be groups of people under the ruler and then groups of people under each of them and groups of people under each of them until it got down to the community level. And that's how they spread word of the laws and some things. So they had a very big system of roads and their government worked well. Terrace farming. How do you farm in a mountain? They dug terraces, like steps off the side, and that's how they, okay, so when we say that, that they stretched, so they started in part of Peru, and then they grew all the way down to where? So all of Peru, modern day Peru, and then where did they stretch to?
They say that like this is very rough, extremely. It started up here at the beginning of the Andes Mountains, and then it basically stretched all the way down the left side, all the way down to.
You're right. So that would be modern day what? Colombia, Ecuador,
Ecuador, El
Argentina.
Argentina.
So all the way down, so Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, it was all the way down the coast. But it was high in the Andes Mountains. And why would you go up high in the mountains, did we talk about before?
They would go up high in the mountains because where they're at, this is basically all tropical jungle. And whenever you're low down in the jungle like that, it's going to be very humid and very hot. So that's why they built up. That's actually why Machu Picchu was where it was, because there's several theories about why Machu Picchu is what it is, but some people think that it was a retreat for their king, but some people think that it was like a holy place. It could be both, but the reason why they built up was to get away from the heat and also so they could look down on their attackers if they were coming from any direction.
Good job, good job. So they had a huge, it was the largest civilization. And, okay. Anything else we should remember? Questions? So the Inca were located where? What mountain? Andes. In what continent? South America, along the coast. Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Argentina, stretched all the way down, very large. Good system of roads and laws, strong system of government. They had farming, potatoes, they were very strong. So what happened? Why would you say they fell?
Diseases.
Who came? Abby showed you a picture of him. Who was it, Abby?
Francisco Pizarro.
Pizarro. And, they ended up overthrowing. So Pachacuti. One thing that I want you to remember, and I don't see it on here, and I thought, sure, I put it on here. They had a technology where they really have writing, but they kept data. They would keep days and days, what we would call, keep up with things, with little knots. It was like string and little knots. Anybody know what that's called?